Hello and welcome to Pompey Talk. Where just 2 seconds ago, Jordan Cross was dying with a massive, don't know what was going on there,
It's
but
not pressing the record button though, Mark, did it? Blimey.
yes, I was going to have to phone a paramedic for Jordy. So you all right, Jordy? Can we continue?
It was that defender last night that brought me out in tears. Oh dear, I'm a bit bleary-eyed anyway from the lack of sleep and the late night, and having to get back at 2:30 in the morning, and then jumping into bed with 2 children, a dog, and the missus in. Then having to decamp to my son's cabin bed to try and get any form of sleep. So there you go. I won't harp on about that too much, but funny night, wasn't it? Funny old night.
Funny old game, as Jimmy Hill would have said. Before we do that, just to remind everybody, yes, this is Pompey Talk. My name is Mark. Jordan's here. We're both here to discuss the events at the CBS Arena on Tuesday night, where Pompey were beaten 5-1. Yes, Jordy, I think John Messino called it a very strange night. I can't think of too many other games where you're seeing the opposition or the away fans celebrating the 5-1 defeat. Circumstances.
Yeah, I think I've been doing this, as you know, like over a quarter of a century now, and I think it's up there with the strangest games that I've ever covered. It was a really odd night, compounded by my laptop misery, which you know all about, which was another element to it, a personal element where my laptop charger or charging port gave up the ghost, and I saw my battery slowly draining on my laptop going into the game, and I had all the it's quite highly pressured anyway when you got your workload on a match day. So that was kind of going on, and then the events on the pitch were going on as Pompey were defending in calamitous fashion. But it was kind of irrelevant. The only game I can kind of think of in strangeness terms compared to it, I just gave it some thought, would be the 2005 final day at West Brom, where West Brom had to win to survive and send Southampton down at the Hawthorns, which I was there as a guest of a West Brom fan that day. So I was there from their angle, and it was one of my favourite games I've ever attended. We were all celebrating. There was a big love-in between the 2 sets of fans, and people were swapping shirts, and there was a billboard with "Play Up Baggies" before the game. But yes, I mean, coming back to this one, it was calamitous defending. I mean, I can sum up the game quite quickly. In terms of, I thought Colby Bishop and Connor Chaplin played well for about 15 minutes. Then they gave the goal away. I thought Majojo Deer looked like an accident waiting to happen, if I'm honest. He was never going to make it beyond half time. And then we had that not disastrous. We can't say disastrous, can we? Because Mark Pugat's told us we can't use disastrous, and that's an absolute no-no, as I well know. A nightmare 3 minutes after the restart. Where I don't quite know what Nico. Well, I know what Nico Smith was playing at. He didn't trust his left foot from a decent, reasonable back pass and tried to put his right, which was when you do that without scanning, is going to end in one nightmare outcome. Felt a bit more for Regan Paul. But anyway, look, don't harp on about the game too much, because Pompey have had a phenomenal period where we were sat there. In a period of 11 days, Pompey have gone from been on the point of dropping into the bottom 3 at Middlesbrough in the 97th minute to a huge 9-point return, which has been the defining moment or the defining period of the season to secure Championship survival. When, even 19 days ago, Pompey were 8 games without a win, and people were extremely worried about how things looked. John Messino being one of them, I'm sure if he's honest, he would have had his doubts at that moment, as it's perfectly understandable. So to turn it around is admirable, and Pompey deserved their flowers for it. John Messino deserves his flowers, and the players for digging deep in those moments to take the team to Championship survival. When you can see the sort of what's going on elsewhere in the country and at other clubs at the moment is some achievement.
Yeah, you've more or less summed up everything I was going to ask you there, so we'll wrap it up.
Let's go. And that concludes Pompey Talk.
Some people may be going, thank God for that there anyway. Yeah, I'm not going to dwell too much on the game then, as you say. So yeah, let's focus on the achievement. Bear in mind where Pompey were against QPR, what 6-1 defeat at Loftus Road just before the international break, to where they are now with 2 games left. They've secured championship status. I don't think many people would have envisaged that there, would you?
No. Well, I mean, if you looked at the odds makers at the time and the odds that Pompey were to go down at those points, I think you would have got some value in it. I think it's really, when you look at defining moments, I've got a slight, we'll talk about it in a minute, but I've got a different defining moment. But certainly, like, people will look to that QPR thrashing and how things turned. And it was really intriguing that the way John Messina came out after that game, because he's very, very reasoned in the maelstrom of football where the pressure's up, the blood is up, the intensity. He comes out with a really good assessment and balanced assessment. I mean, how he does it and does it so accurately is quite something. But that day, he kept the players in the dressing room for a good 3/4 of an hour plus. Yeah. And he came in and did the written press where I spoke to him, and his body language was forlorn that day. That was quite telling. It's not often I've seen John Messina like that. So that sort of spoke of the kind of where he kind of saw things, or where things were for him then at that point. So to turn it around from there, and for my turning point, I would look at Norwich, and even put it down to the introduction of Andre Dizelle as being a real key moment there after that first half performance, which was pretty poor as well, to turn it around and get that point there and then kick on. And I thought that just that turning point was Andre Dizelle coming on in that game and could actually be the turning point of the season there, because he really stilled things up and came in really consistently from there and helped Pompey to those draws and wins that have carried them to where they are now.
Yeah, I might ask you about Dizelle in a wee bit, because he's one of the 4 first-team players out of contract at the end of the season. So we'll definitely touch on that. But O'Neill wrote a story after the game, or no, he's actually writing it today, where Messina was saying that this is a bigger achievement this time around than it was last year. Again, have you got an argument against that there?
I can see why, because he's referencing the injuries that he feels were greater. Well, the numbers bear out they were greater than last season. You can look to key players. I mean, who, like, losing Conor Shocknesty is a key player. People wouldn't have envisaged Colby Bishop's form tailing off so desperately as it did, without any players underneath him. Callum Lang, obviously another big player, being injured and then on his way. So Pompey have been really tested through that period. And last season was kind of, the story was kind of the first half of the season, wasn't it, really, where they were just palpably not at the level.
Yeah.
Whereas this time around, it was the run came late, that 8-game winless run, kind of looking like a key moment in the season. And that's kind of perhaps a slight difference. And it was Pompey just were finding a way. They weren't performing badly, but they were finding ways not to get results when they were performing in a competitive nature and coming up short. So that was alarming and a real worrying trait. So I can kind of, when you throw that in the mix, I can see why. I don't think it's just John sort of, he doesn't use hyperbole anyway, but I can see why he's arrived at that conclusion. And yeah, as I say, it's perfectly normal for people don't see the human side of it to be kind of not plagued, that's too much, but have these moments of self-doubt about John Messina as a manager and whether he can do it, and maybe Rich Hughes as a sporting director and thinking about the recruitment and how things were looking. And it must be kind of humbling in those moments when you kind of are looking at things and it's looking pretty dark. So, but it's obviously character forming as well, and they've grown, they grow as people and head coaches and sporting directors and hopefully players as well to where they are now. And then hopefully the club need to now, moving forward, grow from that into a position where I think one of the traits of the season, these kind of heavy defeats, has been as a kind of consequence of where Pompey are with their squad, that they've not been able to quite sustain. Not so much the kind of the weight of games and fatigue so much. It's just other teams be able to make changes and have more quality, whereas Pompey couldn't. So Pompey need to address that and need to maybe trim some fat from the squad, let's face it, because there's players that, in terms of recruitment, have come up short. That's going to be a challenge moving forward. And as you say, we need to do what we've done, Mark, and look and pause and look at the success of what Pompey have done. But the transient nature of football means we then look forward, and that's the nature of the game, isn't it? So we now look at squads, issues, recruitment, budgets, level of budgets, what the ISAs are offering, and that'd be the kind of narrative, quite rightly, moving forward.
Yeah, well, there's definitely a sentiment where let's enjoy this moment with championships. At the same time, too, there's many people out there already going, right, let's build on this, let's push on. And you've touched on it yourself, and that was literally going to be my next question. Do you think that will happen? Do you think Messino, Rich Hughes will get the backing that a lot of fans really crave from the Eisners? That has to be the main talking point moving forward, doesn't it?
I reckon you might get some quite strong rhetoric from John Messino in the coming days about that, because it'd be a natural thing that we turn to as journalists, because there's like questions that what people want answered about what's going forward, and I think he'd probably need to come out on the front foot, which he has done already, by the way, in terms of saying his belief about how things will move in terms of increased budget moving forward. But that said, we were 12 months ago just a little bit over where he was saying something similar, and it didn't happen. So he would have been frustrated by that, because we're all talking about Hayden Matthews being 1.25 million, and we were looking to go to 2.5 million. Didn't happen, did it? So there has to be that kind of development, hopefully. I think we have to acknowledge that in the Championship, there's no guarantees about what that gets you. I think supporters aren't looking for the world. I think they're looking for competitive budgets and to look to spend these kind of 2.5 million, 3 million in the wages that go with it. But then you have to look at other clubs, rivals, and these kind of 8 to 10 clubs that are spending a lot more for Pompey not to get into the mid-table, or to get themselves relegated to the League One, in fact. So, but I think that needs to be the way to go now. And I think Pompey, that they can't afford to miss, though, really. Whereas other teams can afford to miss when they spend 2.5, 3 million, Pompey can't. They have to hit it. That said, that shouldn't be a barrier to it happening. It needs to happen. We need to have this growth, because you have to reach for those the levels that Pompey hopefully can push on with a bit of backing like that, and establish himself as a Championship outfit.
Regardless of the amount of extra funding Messino might get in the transfer market or the sale of players.
I can see where you're going here, Mark, already.
Right. Well, I was going to say, what I was basically going to say was, you might have actually preempted something incorrectly. What I was going to say was, do you anticipate wholesale changes to that current side? Take last night out of the equation. We all know what happened last night. It was a poor performance. But generally thinking, do you think there will be yet another overhaul of that playing squad this summer?
Yeah, I'll let you get to that question. You know what I'm talking about. It's a good point. It's a good point, Mark, because yes, I mean, there is gaps all over that squad that need us. It's going to be another busy summer. I think we're talking another double-figure signings, but also there's fat, as I say, I'm using the term fat, that needs to be trimmed from that. It's not going to be a straightforward process, because let's just look at it. How many centre backs we got? We got 6 centre backs. How many of those are really viewed as kind of, are they going to be the ones in contention next season? Shocknessi, obviously, Regan Paul. Hopefully Shocknessi stays fit. There's like Jojo Diaz, next one in line at the moment. What happens with Josh Knight? Wasn't cheap. Hasn't been in the squad. Ebane Boat, he's been a fringe player. I think he want to get out and play. Obviously, great success against Leicester. Really pleased for him. Great lad. We sat with him at the end of season dinner. Really engaging company, and just a good egg that you want to do well. Hayden Matthews, a good lad, promising, but been, let's face it, a disappointment at the cost at the moment. So what happens with those? Because you can't go and get another defender without moving those ones on. Pack and Dazelle in midfield, you're probably looking at those being 3 and 4 moving forward. Obviously, Adams, you probably have him as one of your front line ones, but then there's Luke LaRue and Mark Kosnowski as well. I was going to be buying Mark Kosnowski off the back of a serious injury at the moment. Luke LaRue, you think they might want to move on? Would he be able to shift him? Will they have to take a hit on him? Quite possibly. Terry Devlin, he moves on, doesn't he? We all know that. The likelihood is there. But do Pompey say, okay, we've got 2 Championship right backs already, so do we look to move that money to somewhere else in the squad? Left back, Ogilvie, front line, Jacob Farrell, not done it. Do you recruit there? Probably like to get one. And then the big one, I mean, this is the front line obviously needs surgery, and definitely will be the case. And we can look at Ali and Cavallero, and I think Cavallero, I mean, Ali obviously people wanted him to stay at first, but probably would most people say they wanted, with something signing now, quite possibly. What to do with Cavallero? So that's another area. But then the other one, and the place where Pompey been caught out, is obviously the number 9 position and not recruited under Colby Bishop. That would be the most important area if you're picking one area where they need to really put some significant investment to ensure that what happens is covered for in the event of Colby Bishop, who has been in good form lately, goes to where he was, for the best part of the season.
Do you anticipate then, just on this subject too, do you anticipate that Pompey will look to recruit more frontline players, or is it a case of bulking out that squad, giving that a wee bit more depth going forward?
I don't think you can recruit. I don't think you go out to recruit in the position where Pompey are. You have to kind of look to kind of add on and top. I know what you're kind of saying, like longer term players, but I mean the Harvey Blairs and the Franco Umes and people like that, they haven't done it so far. I don't think you can look at it in that way, really, and say that. I mean, you might have to add some. You've got to have some fillers if that's what you want to term it like that in terms of loans, but Pompey need to improve their offering. They need to strengthen in those areas. I would certainly look for a front line midfielder and the wingers. Again, those key areas. When I asked John Messina this, he'd probably say he doesn't need a centre back because he's got 6, but they do need a centre back if you know what I mean in terms of Shocknessie's injury record and Dia, who I think he could be almost. I don't want to use this, but kind of sometimes players are manager killers. They look the part, and you look at him and think, "Oh, what a physical asset he is!" But he's also got a real big ricket in him, so he's not championship ready yet. As much as you kind of say, "Wow, look at him at Middlesbrough," you say, "Well, look at him last night as well."
Yeah.
Swansea, where he was giving me like kittens within 5 minutes, and I'm like, you can't be relying on these players in a championship dogfight. So, maybe he's an example of the one that you maybe is kind of one that's a project more, isn't it, that you were talking. But I think you need to look to recruit frontline players, really.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to focus in on Dazelle, but then ask you a wee bit about the current players who are out of contract at the season. I'm going to talk about Dazelle simply because you said maybe next season him and Pack 3 and 4. Will he want to stay if he's not really going to be the main man alongside Ibu Adams in that midfield next season?
I mean, it won't. I don't think John Messina will go on the contract talks with Andre Dazelle saying I'm not for choice. Maybe I'm kind of for a few hoops down the line there, but I just think that now championship status is secure. If you're looking at the out of contract players, it's a lot easier to keep Andre Dazelle, isn't it? It's a lot easier to keep. I think Zach Swanson. I think Marlon Pack stays anyway. Ogilvie. I don't know. I think you probably could have. Ogilvie would have stayed whatever the division. That's me slightly having a punt on that without having the kind of definitive information underneath it. But I think Andre Dazelle, if Pompey went down, he would have gone. He would have found a championship club. And let's see how that pans out still, because he might well have offers from championship size. I'd be surprised if he doesn't. Same for Zach Swanson, given their success this season. So, I just think that again, you look at how the squad is, and when you go into a season, you think that's going to pan out there. He's going to, Shocknessy and Paul are going to play all day at the back, and Kosnowski might be pushing to be nearer to the starting lineup. As we were going to see, it rarely pans out that way. But I just think it's just squad planning. You're looking to certainly build a front line midfielder into that, and Adams would be certainly your starter, wouldn't he, given his impact moving forward. But Dazelle he's been magnificent. I think he started the season fantastically. I think he didn't quite have the impact that we were hoping for, or I was hoping for, in terms of dynamism, because I think he's got that in his game. But I've just really grown to admire his intelligence and how he shuts off space. And in those 3 critical wins, that really stood out to me, that how he was shutting down space and negating the threat of the opponent, and it goes unnoticed a lot of the time. And I just think he deserves all the plaudits in the world for his game management and football intelligence, which has been really important to Pompey getting the job done.
Yeah, just a quick question on Adrian Sagasic. I'm asking this because all the hype around Terry Devlin. We've seen Terry Devlin grow in the 3 years he's been at Pompey, and look where he is now. As you say, there's a very good chance somebody might come and lure him away from Fratton Park this summer. Is Adrian Sagasic that type of player where he's had a fantastic season, scored last night, Pompey's top goal scorer, that he's just going to grow and grow, and then maybe in 2 seasons' time he's going to be a standout performer for Pompey? Is that the type of progress we're going to see from him?
That would be the hope, wouldn't it? Because it's his first season in English football, 7 goals, 4 assists. Again, when you're reflecting on key influences or contributions, then his trio of assists, from the corners in that period of wins, and it's not like slightly fortuitous, but it was good contact for the assist into Chaplin at Middlesbrough.
Yeah.
Then he would be right front and centre in that. But he's a work in progress. He's 21. I think he's not blessed with natural searing pace that I think John Messina would like to play with as a winger. So I think his evolution would be to come into the middle and play as a 10, or cam, whatever your language is, moving forward, and being a bit more crafty, and looking to get that ball onto that left foot. But there's work to be done. And as I say, whether he can kind of bring that kind of step up in physicality that is required in English football in the Championship is one element they need to work on. He referenced improving his right foot, which is another target for me. The big target for Segicic for me has to be out of possession. At times, at critical moments when you get caught out in game, out of possession, if you switch off for a moment, it kills you. And Pompey in the first half at Middlesbrough were outstanding, and Cavallero was outstanding and showed his progress in understanding what he needed to do out of possession, in terms of the defensive shape, dropping deeper into that low or mid block, and then kind of doing the pressing at the right times and getting the press right. Segicic doesn't quite seem to have the intelligence to do that at times, and I've noticed it a bit. I can think of a moment against Ipswich last week where he switched off and let Jack Clark run behind him, and we almost got caught out there. So these are the things which, he's a young lad and he can improve on that. So but that's another big area for Adrian. If he wants to make it as a Championship player, he needs to make those strides. And he's a great lad, real live wire. He's everything you expect from an Aussie, with his confidence, but really great character. There's hope and optimism that he can make those strides and be a kind of bona fide Championship player.
Okay, I'm not going to ask that obvious question, which you think I'm going to ask. There's plenty of time. There's time and place for that there. We've got another Pompey Talk probably on Friday.
Okay, you're playing the long game there.
We're
talking about John Messina's future another day. Let's enjoy this one.
Let's just wait. Let's just wait another one. But before we do go, one more from me. It's going to be intriguing how Messina approaches these next 2 games. Is it going to be a case of giving some of the French players a chance to play for their futures, really?
Do you know what I want these next 2 games to be? I love pre-season. I love pre-season because you go to the games, the sun's shining. There's not quite the pressure as a journalist of when you're in the season. I don't seem the workload doesn't seem to be quite the same. Don't give me carte blanche to now up my workload as a result of saying that, by the way. but it's just there's optimism. When you go into a season, hope springs eternal, and every season, no matter what, you start the season, it's a clean slate, and you have it battered out of you by November when the cold realities of how things are going hit home. Well, that's what this next 2 games could be like. It could be like pre-season. All right, we're looking forward. The pressure's off. Let's just enjoy it. We haven't got to get the results. You can try out a few things. Don't think, your injured players. I don't think Josh Murphy plays again this season because there's no point in risking him. And that's what these next 2 games are going to be like. And the fact that Pompey are there with 2 games to spare, who would have thought it? Who would have thought it was not going to be, it's going to be a pressure. For all the world, I thought it was going to be a pressurised, nervy day against Birmingham for Championship survival. So to do that with 2 games is a big, big cause for celebration, and well done to all concerned.
Indeed. I don't think Anthony Collins is going to be too pleased. You're going to call these 2 games pre-season friendlies if they're looking bums on seats to ramp up the revenue for Joe Messino. But never mind. No, Johnny, thank you very much for that. There, great insight from you as always. Thank you for joining me today, and thank you all for watching. As I say, we'll be back probably Friday, so stay tuned. You can watch all our videos on YouTube as well, and we'll also be doing plenty of stuff on our social media channels as well. Until Friday, thank you all for watching. Goodbye.